Hi guys, so welcome to this nutritional presentation presented by me, Aled Zachary from DNA Nutrition in conjunction with IPRS Health. And in this first presentation, we're going to be covering basically Nutrition 101 and what makes a good diet. So first and foremost, if you came into this presentation looking for kind of magic tips, tricks, hacks, or kind of me selling you potions that are going to give you 7-minute abs, then unfortunately you're going to be disappointed. But that's not to say the advice I'm going to give you is not going to be useful. Or for some of you, it might challenge some of those pre-existing beliefs that you might have regarding nutrition. So first and foremost, who am I? So I am a nutritionist I qualified from Mac Nutrition University in 2017. I've got my own online nutrition company, and I work with a colleague of mine, Dan, with his online and in-person personal training fitness business. I'm part of the Mac Nutrition Mentoring Lab, which is essentially somewhere where I can continue a bit of professional development as a nutritionist. And I also have an online accreditation as a personal trainer as well. So just to give you a bit of reassurance that I'm not just Joe Blogs off the street giving you advice here. Now, why listen to me? Well, I like to think my approach uses this kind of three-tiered approach here, where I've been doing this work since around 2015, and I'm using that experience coupled with the latest scientific research, and also coupled with what I know about having worked with kind of hundreds of individuals in that time. So you could call this an evidence-based approach, but that's not ignoring the needs of the individual or my experience of working with those people, because there are kind of central diet principles, but the way we apply those to the individual might change. And related to that, whilst kind of opinions are many, there is actual nutritional facts, scientific facts within the nutritional sphere. So when you hear some of the things I'm going to present to you here, and you'll have a friend say to you, well, it worked for me, or John from the gym said that this works, or you have a friend or kind of brother, sister who just lost 7 pounds on a juice detox diet. These are all what we call anecdotal evidence. They're kind of the lowest form of evidence, and these kind of anecdotes really don't explain much or tell us why people are successful with their diets. As I said, there are kind of scientific principles when it comes to nutrition, and many people will kind of stumble across these and find approaches that work for them, kind of in spite of, not because of what actually works. So everything I'm going to tell you in this is backed up by research and kind of the medical establishment. So I'm hopefully going to paint a picture where you can see, you can kind of wade yourself through the murky waters that is the nutritional world. And just a kind of statement of intent here at the start. I would like you, or we would like you, to be an active participant in these webinars. So if there's information you receive that you want further clarification on, or you find interesting and want to know where you can find out further information on that particular topic, then ask questions, be curious, as Stephen Hawking used to say. That is the whole point of this course, is to kind of upskill your knowledge on nutrition to help you with your health goals. So let's dive into the content after that kind of preamble. I'm going to start with the nutritional pyramid. Now, this might not be familiar to many of you, but this nutritional pyramid is essentially what should make up a good diet, in my opinion. And the nutritional pyramid itself should be kind of encompassed as part of your lifestyle. Really kind of diet and nutrition they're kind of bound up with how we live our day-to-day lives. And the two go hand in hand, to be honest. Now, I've kind of weighted the pyramid so that the foundations here, or the most important things, are near the bottom, and the things we need to focus less on are near the top. And you can see, I'm just going to make a passing comment to it here before giving you some further info, but supplements, or kind of vitamins and kind of pills and potions and stuff like that, are right at the very top. They're kind of the icing on the cake, and actually they're probably responsible for next to none of your results when it comes to health or weight loss goals with your nutrition. This is where you should be putting your effort, down at the bottom. So if we run through this, I'm going to break these sections down over the next hour to 90 minutes. We're going to go over these sections in detail. And if there's anything here that is appears now unfamiliar, or these terms you're not familiar with, don't worry, because we're going to go over them. So the first and foremost is eating to calorie needs, or eating to energy needs, and we're going to go over why fat loss or kind of maintaining your weight is all about energy in versus energy out. Supporting this, we then have food quality, or basically eating mostly healthy foods to allow to support good health. Coming up from that, we then there needs to be a bit of a focus on the balance of macronutrients. So macro meaning big nutrients. Macro isn't just a place where you go to buy bulk chicken breasts and big cakes and things like that. So getting sufficient proteins, carbohydrates and fats in your diet, as well as fibre, to help manage, help promote good health. Up from that, we have meal timing, and contrary to popular belief, meal timing, or when you eat your food, is of kind of little importance really to your overall health and to fat loss or weight loss. And then, as I said at the top, we have supplements, or the icing on the cake that really people need to spend less time worrying about. And with that, let's go into calories, or what are actually the key to weight loss or gain. So in this section, we're going to cover what is a calorie, where do you get them from, and calories in versus calories out. So what is a calorie? A calorie is actually a measure of energy, or in fact, the amount of energy needed to heat 1 litre of water by 1 degree centigrade. So what they do, or what they used to do to measure a calorie, was put foods or various fuels in what they call a bomb calorimeter, and burn it within the bomb calorimeter, and they would measure how much, the amount of energy needed to raise, or the amount of fuel needed to raise that a litre of water by 1 degree centigrade. Now, since then, they've kind of moved on, and because of nutritional research, we have calorie estimates for pretty much all foods. So they can, via kind of nutritional software and things like that, they can make very accurate predictions on the calorie content of various foods without having to stick them in a bomb calorimeter. And different foods have different calorific values that may act differently within the body. So proteins, fats and carbohydrates all get treated differently by the body, but a calorie is still a calorie in terms of absolute energy. Now, carbohydrates have 4 kilocalories per gram, proteins 4 as well, fats have 9 calories per gram, and alcohol, or what we call the fourth macronutrient, has 7 calories per gram. So when we talk about carbohydrates, what do we mean? Things like root veg, bread, pasta, oats, rice, fruit are predominantly pure carb sources. Protein, we're talking about things like turkey or chicken breasts, meats, lean meats, eggs, fish, lean dairy. This is skyr, or you may have seen Greek yogurt in the supermarket. Protein supplements and things like beans, pulses, lentils, etc. are actually quite a significant source of protein. Fats, we have things like full-fat dairy, blue top milk, nuts and seeds, so there's a picture of some almonds there, avocados, refined oils like olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, and refined dairy products like butter or ghee. And then alcohol, everyone's favourite vice on a weekend, beer, wine, clear spirits, dark spirits, you get the gist there. Now, when it comes to weight loss or gain, that is all dictated by your calorie intake versus your calorie output, or energy intake versus energy output. So if the amount of calories coming in is equal to the amount of calories going out, then as it just would on a scales, your weight or your body, your body mass will remain stable. And it's worth saying at this point that calories in, so all the energy coming into your system, into your body, is purely managed by your diet. Humans are not plants. We cannot produce energy via photosynthesis. We cannot absorb energy through our skin, through kind of any other form. So all the energy coming into your body's system is coming in via diet. The energy outside of the equation, we obviously have our bodily processes, our kind of metabolism that burns energy. We burn energy through our daily movements, so walking about, just the activities of daily living. We burn energy via exercise, and we can also burn energy via what we call the thermic effect of feeding, or kind of counterintuitively, your body has to expend energy to release energy from foods. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense. So chewing, producing saliva, producing enzymes, the muscular contractions of your gut, that all expends energy. And as I covered in the previous slide there, various foods, so those proteins, those carbohydrates, those fats, will require more or less energy to a certain degree to process by your body, and we'll go on to that in the forthcoming slides. So let's table an example here of what I mean by maintaining weight. So we've got a theoretical example here of a person, a man or a woman needs 2,500 calories to maintain their weight. 2,500 calories times 7 for 7 days of the week is 17,500 calories per week. So the energy in here, 2,500 calories over the sum of the week, comes to the same amount as the energy being burnt. So energy out matches energy in equals we're maintaining weight. So what happens for us to gain weight? And if you haven't guessed it already, it comes down to an energy surplus. So the energy coming in via diet exceeds that energy going out via your metabolism, your activity level, and that's non-exercise activity or plus exercise, and that thermic effect of food, of feeding. So here we have an imbalance, and we have a tip in the scales, and this leads to weight gain. More calories coming in than we're burning equals weight gain. It's as simple as that. And at this point, it's worth pointing out that nearly 2/3 of the Western world is currently obese or overweight. And to be honest, this doesn't happen for one single reason or event, contrary to what you might read in the newspaper or on Facebook or on the internet. And it's often what we term insidious weight gain. We gain very small amounts of weight, week to week, month to month, year to year. And, if we, perfect example, if we were only to gain 1 pound of weight per week, for many people that wouldn't really be noticeable, but by the end of the year you've gained 52 pounds, and before you know it, it can lead to a bit of a vicious cycle. And it's also exacerbated as we age, because we tend to move less as we age due to old age, due to those aging creaky bodies. We don't exercise as much, we don't move around as much. So we actually burn less calories as we get older, because we're not moving as much. And weight gain is totally multifactorial, and underlying causes will differ from person to person, and even within the same person from time to time within the same person. So what might have worked for you when you're young, fit, and healthy in your teens doesn't necessarily work for you when you're in your mid-40s and kind of stressed with work and trying to juggle a family and all the other things that go with living a modern day lifestyle. Now, this slide looks mega complicated, but the only reason I wanted to put this into this presentation is just to demonstrate that to you, just how multifactorial weight gain can be. These are all the factors within the person that contribute to energy storage, and these are all the factors outside the person that can contribute to energy storage. Many of these are beyond our control, they're kind of environmental, and some of these can be genetic or kind of related to disease. So there are things we can change, there are some things we cannot change, both inside and outside the person. In some respects, you can be a victim of your own circumstances. This is a slide from the Obesity Society, who do some brilliant research on this kind of front. But you can just see just how many different factors can influence energy storage and thus weight gain. And when I talked about that insidious weight gain, let's go back to that graphical example I put up just a couple of minutes ago. So here we have someone with that same weight maintenance figure of 2,500 calories. And during the week, we're being pretty good. We're sticking to that weight maintenance figure. But then the weekend comes along. And we feel the weekend is a time to enjoy ourselves, be that socially or, kind of treat ourselves. And as a result, we eat an extra 1,000 calories both Saturday and Sunday. Might not sound like a lot, but that bumps our average weekly intake up to 19,500 calories. So in this scenario, calories in is more than calories out by about 2,000 calories per week, and our weight will increase as a result. And the same can be said for big weekends actually preventing weight loss. So some of you who may have unsuccessfully, in inverted commas, dieted in the past, you're good Monday to Friday. You're creating a calorie deficit, which is needed for fat loss. So in this instance, we've got a 500 calorie deficit Monday to Friday. But if we do the math, 5 times 2,000 calories is 10,000, plus 2 times 3,500 calories gives us an actual weekly sum intake of 17,000 calories. The calories in is slightly lower than the calories out. And in this instance, if we were consistent with that kind of intake, it would take 7 weeks to lose 1 pound of fat, which is almost unnoticeable. So that's just a, I suppose, graphical example of how weekends can undo the good work you are doing during the week. Your body doesn't know it's the weekend. Your body doesn't care about your goals. All your body cares about is keeping you alive. And it is very efficient at absorbing energy. It's the reason humans have been so successful, or the most successful species on the planet, because we absorb and store energy very efficiently, and that's why we can. Those kind of genetic traits allowed us to survive very kind of lean periods of food availability. But it's also conversely now, when we're living in a westernized environment where there is food on every street corner, food in every office, we move less, we eat more, and our bodies are designed to store energy for those leaner times, for those ice ages. Unfortunately, at the minute, we don't have those leaner times. We have, especially in the westernized countries, we have too much food and too much kind of comfort. We drive everywhere, we sit down at a desk all day, and it's an absolute recipe for our bodies to store energy and for us to become overweight. So when we talk about calories, at this point you're probably thinking, well, how many calories do I actually need? Well, calorie needs can and will vary from person to person. It's dependent on a multitude of factors: age, occupation, genetics, how much you sleep, how much muscle you're carrying. So there is a lot of factors that influence how many calories you need, and so there are a number of ways to work out how many calories you should be eating per day. You can track your diet using a journal or using there are online or actual smartphone apps you can use now to track your energy intake. And if you track your energy intake and your daily body weight for changes over 2 weeks and take the average of both, you should be able to arrive at a figure that will give you an average calorie intake needed. There are online calculators, or you can multiply your body weight by a certain number. So this is MyFitnessPal, quite a common nutritional smartphone tracking app that people use these days. There are online calculators like the based on equations done by researchers. We've got the Mifflin St. John and Harris Benedict equations, or you can multiply it by a certain number. A very rough and ready method to calculate how many calories you need is to multiply your body weight by 14 to 16 calories. That, for most people, if you're active or if you're male, will give you a maintenance figure. For fat loss, if you multiply your body weight by 10 to 12 calories per pound of body weight, and if you're smaller or less active, probably 12 to 14 calories per pound of body weight is more suitable for maintenance of body weight. So as I said, if you're active and or male, start at the higher end of those recommendations. And if you're inactive, start at the lower end. So for example, if you weighed 70 kilos or 154 pounds, which equates to about 11 stone, then 154 times 10 to 12 gives us a range here between around 1500 calories to around 1800 calories needed, what you would need for fat loss. And just substitute 10 to 12 for 12 to 14 or 14 to 16 for your kind of maintenance level of calories. That doesn't mean you have to count calories forever, but it might be useful as a start point just to get an idea of how much food you do actually need for fat loss or how much food you do actually need to maintain your current body weight. Moving on from calories, let's cover eating clean or micronutrients. And that kind of second block of the pyramid in terms of food quality. Now, we often think of healthy and clean foods as being synonymous with a good diet. And clean foods, if we think about it, it's those whole foods. It's fruit, veg, lean meats, dairy, eggs, foods that I always term it foods that your grandmother knows or would identify as being good for you. However, it's worth pointing out at this point that energy balance is still king when it comes to weight loss or gain, because contrary to what you may have read in magazines or on the internet, you can't eat an unlimited amount of food, especially those high in calories, and expect to remain weight stable. You can still eat too much good food. For example, an avocado is a clean or healthy food, but it's also very calorie dense. If you ate a lot of avocados, you would gain weight. So calories or eating within our calorie budget is still absolutely paramount when it comes to weight loss and therefore long-term health. And that's because, as I said, healthy eating doesn't even really mean weight loss or even health. If you overconsume healthy foods, you will become overweight. And if there's one thing that is fundamentally clear from the scientific literature to date, it's that being overweight is extremely unhealthy in terms of impacts on our bodies, such as our joints, to heart health, to risk of certain diseases as well. So we're going to cover why I just wanted to go over why calories are actually king when it comes to weight loss or gain. So this is Professor Mark Horb, who is a university lecturer in nutrition at Kansas State University. And here's him eating typical healthy foods, but eating quite a few calories there, 2,700 calories. And he fully admits himself, I was eating healthily, but I was eating too much. So Mark Horb wanted to demonstrate the importance of calorie intake, and he came up with the idea of the Twinkie diet, where essentially he replaced all those healthy foods with mostly junk and primarily Twinkies, or these little cream-filled American cakes. And he did have some healthy stuff with that, some lean protein sources such as a protein shake, some veg, but the majority of his diet was junk food, with one key point. He created a calorie deficit, even though he was eating junk. And in 10 weeks, he lost 27 pounds with the bulk of his diet coming from junk foods. He went from a little over 201 pounds down to 174 pounds, or he lost 27 pounds, 2 stone in 10 weeks, by eating what most of us would deem junk foods. And he also improved his cholesterol, so his LDL cholesterol, or bad cholesterol, dropped by 20%, his good cholesterol increased by 20%, and he had a nearly 40% reduction in triglycerides, or the amount of fat in his blood. Still don't believe me that calories are king? You've probably all heard of Supersize Me. Well, this science teacher, again in America, decided he really didn't like the message that Supersize Me was giving out. So he came up with his own experiment, and he called it Downsize Me, where he ate 3 meals at McDonald's for 6 months. So 3 meals a day at McDonald's for 6 months. And in those 6 months, he lost over 60 pounds. And again, blood sugars improved, his cholesterol levels improved, as well as triglycerides, or the amount of fat in his blood, all by eating 3 meals a day at McDonald's, but more importantly, calorie controlled. So no supersizing, no adding extra portions, controlling his calories. And the final example, this is a chap called Anthony Howard Crow, who was a bit of a nutritional blogger, kind of online nutritional blogger, and his site Abs and Ice Cream became quite the hit in 2017. He did a 100-day experiment where he ate 80% of his daily calories from ice cream, and for context, that is, I think it was 2 or 3 tubs of Ben and Jerry's per day, 230 grams of sugar per day, 65 grams of saturated fat, and even though he was eating 80% of his calories from ice cream, he still lost over 20 pounds again, improved his triglycerides again, improved his cholesterol again, and also improved what we call your cardiac risk factor, or basically the chances that you're going to die or experience a cardiac event, such as a heart attack or a stroke. So I bet you're all thinking at this very junction that I'm saying food quality doesn't matter. Well, it does. I'm just using those 3 examples to show you the importance of calorie balance. Food quality does matter. So what is a balanced diet? This is taken from Alan Aragon, who is a university lecturer and quite popular within nutritional circles. And basically this is how he, and I agree with this, having the training I have and having reviewed the literature I have, this is what the definition of a balanced diet should be. So 70% of your diet should come from whole and minimally processed food that you actually enjoy. You shouldn't necessarily have to base your diet on foods you don't enjoy, because you won't stick to it. There should be 10% from whole and minimally processed foods that are kind of neutral to your taste. So things like, here we've got green beans and broccoli. You might not necessarily like green beans or broccoli, but you can tolerate them. That it's not such a chore for you to eat them, and they're important because they're full of micronutrients. And if you do that, if 80% of your diet is coming from whole and minimally processed foods that you either love the taste of or that are neutral to your taste, you've then got room for maybe a bit of questionable or semi-junk food you love the taste of. Eat Natural bars, one of my favourites. When you actually look at the nutritional content of an Eat Natural bar, even though it's full of nuts and seeds and things like that, in terms of calories, it's probably not far away from Another favourite of mine, a Mars bar. They're actually very similar in calorie content. So yeah, if 80% of your diet is coming from whole and minimally processed foods, you have a little bit of room here for the odd treat from questionable or semi-junk food that you enjoy, and obviously a bit of blatant junk now and again. But the key is getting this pie chart or this balance skewed towards whole and minimally processed foods. So, and the reason food quality is important is for these reasons. By basing the majority of your diet on those whole and minimally processed foods, we're going to get sufficient fiber for digestion to keep our digestive system healthy. Food volume, it's going to help fill your stomach. And with that comes satiety or feeling of fullness, which controls hunger. And if you've ever got hangry or gone to a supermarket feeling hungry, you know you will make worse choices essentially. We need those micronutrients, those vitamins and minerals that are present in those whole foods. And clean foods are often high in volume, low in calories, and full of kind of micronutrients. So we also don't absorb the same number of calories from them. So in a roundabout way, food quality is very indirectly very important to your calorie balance. And just a graphical example here, 400 calories of fruit and veg versus 400 calories of fried chicken or 400 calories of oil. In which of these examples do you think is going to keep you feeling full and keep you healthy? Hopefully that is obvious. So moving on from food quality, let's dive into the macronutrients or what make up our foods. So macro, like I said, are big nutrients. We've got protein, fats, carbohydrates. Fiber is a subset of carbohydrates, and alcohol, or the fourth macronutrient. Let's kick off with protein, or in my opinion, one of the most important food types for you guys to focus on. So protein provides 4 calories per gram. Protein is made up of little building blocks called amino acids. And these amino acids form the blocks or basis of muscles, teeth, skin and bones. It's also used to form enzymes, which are important in health and digestion. And the current recommended daily allowance is probably low. The government recommended daily allowance is low. And what is recommended to prevent disease or the RDA doesn't mean it's necessarily optimal from a health perspective or optimal from those of you wanting to lose weight. And 1.4 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight is probably a better place to start when it comes to protein intake. What are the health benefits of making sure you get adequate protein? Well, firstly, healthy skin and hair. It's huge in improving weight loss outcomes. So increasing your protein will result in a spontaneous calorie reduction usually. It helps with satiety, or those feelings of fullness, so it keeps you fuller for longer. And protein has the highest thermic effect of food, you've probably experienced this if you've ever been to a Brazilian barbecue and eaten too much steak and pork chops and barbecued meats, the meat sweats, and that is because protein is up to 25% of the calories contained in protein are wasted during its digestion. And it also helps with muscle retention, immune function, and recovery from exercise. Will too much protein hurt your kidneys though? These are 3 examples here of research that has been carried out on the health effects of protein, and there are many more. But I've just cited these 3 because in these 3 studies conducted, these guys have taken protein intake up to pretty high amounts. In this last study here, up to 3 grams per kilo of body weight per day for a year, which is an absurdly high amount of protein, and no harmful effects were observed. Essentially, if you eat more protein, if you don't have any pre-existing issues with your kidneys will just adapt to the increased load, essentially. It is in no way unhealthy. So the take homes on protein, most people don't actually eat enough. Again, what's recommended to prevent disease doesn't mean that's enough for optimal health. And increasing your protein will keep you fuller, help you recover from exercise, build muscle, and burn calories. And for most people, if you're shooting between 3 to 5 portions from meals or snacks of 20 to 30 grams throughout the day, that should help with either weight loss or seeing some of those health benefits, such as more muscle retention, recovery from exercise, and even things like I've had clients note how the quality of their nails have improved as they've increased their protein intake. Moving on from protein, let's cover fats and kind of the health benefits, and maybe some myths around fats. So what are the functions of fat? It's the largest energy store in the body. It helps with insulation. It helps with protection of vital organs and immune function. It produces our hormones, our sex hormones, which help with various things from mood to body composition. There are fat-soluble vitamins, so it helps us absorb micronutrients. My brother is a chef, and he always says fat is flavour. Fat is very tasty. It helps with tasting foods, and fat also helps with with satiety or fullness. The current research indicates that we should be getting at least 20% of our calories from fat. So for a 70 kilogram female, that equates to 35 to 84 grams of fat per day, which is probably more than you've seen recommended by kind of the UK government or other publications. Now you can go lower than this, but it's not recommended for extended periods of time. And some fats are actually essential. They must be present in the diet because the body can't produce them. So let's cover different types of fat. We have saturated fats; those ones contained within things like red meat, cheese, and dairy. Monounsaturated fats; these are primarily plant-based sources such as avocados and nuts like almonds, macadamias as well. And polyunsaturated fats, so vegetable oils, salmon or fish oils, and other nuts and seeds. And the research on this actually indicates we should aim for a balance of all three, so a good mix from various sources. Because contrary to popular belief, you cannot eat more fat to burn more fat. Some of you watching this may be familiar with Joe Wicks, kind of popular diet celebrity who's been around since around 2016-17, and he promotes this thinking of eating more fat to burn more fat. But what actually happens if you eat more fat, because as I mentioned previously, your body kind of doesn't care about your goals, all that actually happens by eating more dietary fat, your body will just switch its fuel burning to burn more of that incoming dietary fat. If you burning body fat or not, so burning the stored energy contained on your body is the function of whether you're in a calorie deficit or surplus. If you're in a calorie deficit, you will burn body fat because you're in an energy imbalance state. But if you eat more fat, which, as we've seen, is an extremely energy-dense macronutrient, then there's a high likelihood that you won't be in a calorie deficit, and your body will just burn more of the dietary fat rather than the body fat, which, if your goal is weight loss, that's what everybody wants. So take homes on fats, they essentially play a number of absolutely vital roles within the body. They are energy dense though, and as a result of being energy dense, they're easy to overeat. We should avoid low intakes, and we should aim for a balanced intake of fat of saturates, monounsaturates, and polyunsaturates. All three are required for kind of optimal health. Eating more fat doesn't make you burn more body fat, and it certainly isn't the bad guy that was once promoted in the 1980s when the kind of advent of low-fat diets came around. Moving on from fats in terms of macronutrients, let's go into carbohydrates, and maybe some more myths surrounding carbs. So it provides the same amount of energy per gram as protein, 4 calories per gram. They help with digestion because they're a source of dietary fibre. So things like wholemeal bread, wholemeal pasta, oats in particular, fruit and veg. They provide volume to the diet. They keep us feeling full. Carbohydrates can actually help with sleep. So you've probably heard that you shouldn't eat carbohydrates before bed. Carbohydrates before bed can actually be beneficial if you're struggling with sleep. They help with the release of something called tryptophan, and that can help with restful sleep. And sleep is a huge player in maintaining health and certainly maintaining a healthy body weight. Carbohydrates are a source of glucose, which is the fuel of the brain, but they are non-essential. If you were stuck on a desert island and you couldn't eat any carbohydrates, but you could get proteins, so meat and fats, a source of fat, you would be fine. Our body can produce glucose from fats and proteins, but if we're talking optimal health and maintaining a healthy body weight or looking to lose body weight in a healthy manner, although they're non-essential, I would say they're a large, what should be a large component of your diet. And we store carbohydrates or glucose in two places, primarily in our body. So obviously we've got body fat for the storage of fats. Carbohydrates actually get stored either in our liver to maintain blood sugar levels, or they're stored in muscles. And the storage form of carbohydrates is called glycogen. So you've probably heard the term simple versus complex carbohydrates. So when we talk about simple carbs, we're talking about single molecules of glucose, which means it's faster digesting. Complex carbs, or links of carbohydrates together, are things like starch or that glycogen I've just referred to, that storage form of glucose within your muscles and your liver. These complex carbs, are generally slower digesting. But this, to be honest, this doesn't really give us the full picture of how our body deals with carbohydrates. And people will band about terms like glycemic index. So, for instance, white rice has a high GI, but when that doesn't really matter because we often eat mixed meals. So we'd have that white rice with some vegetables and maybe some meat, which is a source of protein and fat. Once we start combining foods, that changes things like the rate at which it leaves your stomach, or what we call gastric emptying rate, and also changes the speed at which it's digested. Thus, it changes the GI, the glycemic index of the meal. So GI really doesn't give us a full picture of what's going on. For example, white potatoes have an extremely high GI, but white potatoes, when studied, also they're full of nutrients for a start. They're a very healthy source of carbohydrates. But white potatoes have a high, what we call, satiety index. So they keep white potatoes, conversely, will keep you feeling full. So although they have a high GI, they keep you feeling full. And as we've covered in some of those previous slides, keeping full can help manage our calorie intake. So as a bit of a take homes here, how many carbs or how many carbohydrates do you need? Well, needs will differ hugely from individuals to individuals, and that will be based on your current body weight, how much and what type of training you're doing, be that resistance training or running or any kind of exercise really. Carbs are our kind of performance fuel. And And your goals, whether you're looking to kind of improve your exercise performance, get a bit fitter, or fat loss. Um, Now, do excess carbohydrates make us fat? We've heard this, but things like insulin spikes and things like that bandied about quite often recently. And essentially, it's very very hard for your body to actually convert carbohydrates to fat. It's a process known as, the scientific term is known as de novo lipogenesis, and it's essentially a mechanism by which carbohydrates or glucose can be turned into body fat. And much like the example with fats, what actually happens if you eat more carbs, you just burn more carbs, and your body will store the dietary fat coming in. Um, and so you might be thinking, well, I like carbohydrates, I like my rice, I like my pasta, so I'm just going to eat lots of carbs and keep my fat intake really low, so my body doesn't store dietary fat. Well, again, um, storing body fat will only occur if you're in a surplus of energy, um, and even then, if you're in a surplus of energy and you keep your fats low, then your body will just upregulate the storage of carbs to fats. So it will upregulate this de novo lipogenesis process. In reality, nobody eats that low fat. So if you're eating too much food, it will get stored in one manner or another. Um, so yeah, ultimately it comes back to that energy balance. And the more active you are, so the more exercise you do, if this is part of kind of a lifestyle change, then the more carbohydrates you need. Um, Carbs for go. Think of carbs for go. They are your performance fuel. So take homes, yeah, needs will differ. They're not essential, but they are essential to optimal performance and health. There's nothing, absolutely nothing inherently fattening about carbohydrates. Um, but many of us do have a tendency to overeat them, especially when we are inactive. So if you could pen yourself in with that, then it's probably a good idea for you to cut back on your carbohydrate intake potentially, especially the overly refined sources that are not going to fill us up. And sugar, which is contained in carbohydrate sources, it is easy to overeat, but it is not in itself bad. For example, apples, quite high in sugar, but they're also kind of calorie sparse. A medium apple is about 75 calories, and yet most of the carbohydrate contained in an apple is sugar, but it also comes with micronutrients and it also comes with fiber and water. An apple is certainly going to keep you fuller than 4 teaspoons of sugar than it contains. Which, this is probably a good point to cover. Is sugar really that sweet poison that we've all been told it is? Well, there are three different types of sugars that we really need to know about. So we've covered glucose, blood glucose essentially, and this is what starchy foods are broken down into, and it is fuel for your muscles and your brain. Things like Lucozade are pure glucose. Then we have fructose, or fruit sugar, and fructose is primarily processed in your liver, and it contributes to keeping blood sugar levels stable. And finally, we have sucrose, or table sugar. Now, sucrose is a combination of two different sugars. It's a combination of glucose and fructose bonded together, which kind of makes sense if you think about where sucrose or table sugar comes from. Sucrose comes from the cane sugar plant and then is refined. So it is a combination of fructose and glucose bonded together. So let's cover off the bad. Sugar is what's known as hyperpalatable, or it just tastes damn good. but only really when it's combined with a source of fat. So think ice cream, cheesecake, pastries, all of those things that contain sugar, salt, and fat, um, and the carbohydrate source being sugar, being very refined. And as a result, these things, they're not very satiating, filling, and they're easy to overeat. They tend to be calorie dense, really tasty, and leave you feeling hungry, especially when in liquid form. So if we look at things like full fat Coke, full fat is a bit of a misnomer. Full fat Coke should be, people call it full fat Coke, but it should be full sugar Coke. Um, and liquids tend to bypass what we call the cephalic phase of eating. So the taste, smell, texture, even the anticipation of eating a food all influence the amount of hunger hormones your body will produce. And liquids, because you can drink them so quickly, bypass that phase essentially, and lead to you ingesting a load of calories very quickly, with very little kind of volume really, or anything to make you feel full in them. So they're just easy to overdo, and your appetite is kind of taste specific. You've got different on your taste buds. You've got different kind of tastes that your body keys into. And if you've just had a big savoury meal and you feel stuffed, most people can always find room for pudding because it's a kind of change of taste and texture on the palate. And we've all been there. We've all, on a Sunday had a full Sunday roast or Christmas dinner is a perfect example. Full Christmas dinner, we're absolutely stuffed, and we've always got room for Christmas pud or trifle afterwards. And most of us are not really these days that diligent about our diet, and we could probably do with eating a little less sugar. But does sugar actually make you fat? Well, in this example, some researchers looked at, they put people on a diet where they were on a 600 calorie per day calorie deficit, and in they split the dieters into two groups. One group only getting 5% of their calories from sugar, and the other group, the sugar containing diet, getting 10% of their calories from sugar. And there were essentially no statistical differences in weight loss at the end of the study. So sugar containing diet, no sugar, same amount of weight loss because they were in a calorie deficit. Then if we look at kind of some of the nutritional trends or nutritional data, this is prepared from the Economic Research Service in the US, and this is tracking rates of obesity versus carbohydrate intake over between from the 1980s up until about 2010. And you can see here that obesity has continued to rise at a nice steady rate, whereas our carb intake since probably the late 90s has actually reduced. And if we then extrapolate that onto sugar, the trend is even more notable. Again, obesity levels continue to rise, but because of health campaigns regarding added sugars to the diet, to our diets, people are actually a bit more clued up on sugar now, and sugar intake has come down. So there you can see our sugar intake probably is in line with where it was in the early 90s, late 80s, but obesity levels have continued to rise kind of unabated. So everybody is blaming carbohydrates and sugars, whereas the data doesn't really support that. Yet, if we look at added fat intake, and this is probably correlates with our intake of those hyperpalatable or junk type foods, added fat intakes have increased bang in line with obesity. Yet most health authorities or kind of things you may have read on the internet or seen in magazines, people aren't really blaming fat intake. And that's not, again, not to say that fats are bad. that just shows that we're probably eating more refined and calorie dense foods than we once were. So moving on from carbohydrates and sugars, let's move into a subset of carbohydrate, again, fibre, why we should eat our fibre. So fibre is the non-digestible part of carbohydrates, and it can be broken down into soluble fibre, which is a bit viscous or sticky and forms a gel in the gut. So things like oats, nuts and seeds, beans and lentils contain soluble fibre. Then we have insoluble fibre, roughage or bulk, and that comes from cereals, wholemeal bread, wholemeal rice, things like that, vegetable skins, and some fruit and veg. And in 2015, the UK government actually raised its recommendations to 30 gram per day for adults, and that's because most people don't get anywhere near enough fibre, because the health benefits are actually numerous. So dietary fibre helps reduce the risk of heart disease, stroke, hypertension, basically high blood pressure, diabetes, and certain kind of issues to do with your gut. It improves blood sugar control in diabetics. It keeps us regular, making sure that we can go to the loo. It aids in weight loss by keeping us full, but because it also decreases transit time of food through your body, allowing less food to be digested, increases that dietary bulk, and decreases energy density, so we get more food volume for less calories. How can you get more fibre? Or why should you get more fibre? Well, as you've just seen, an absolute myriad of health benefits and weight loss benefits. The main way to do that, and this isn't rocket science again, it's to increase that fruit and veg intake. Most people do not even get the recommended 5 a day, and more research is coming out showing that should probably be more like 8 a day. That might sound unachievable, but like any goal, it's just making small changes. A piece of fruit with breakfast, making sure that you adhere to things like a half plate rule, so get half a plate of vegetables with your maybe evening meal. Picking things like salads for lunch rather than the easy thing of a meal deal and a sandwich and a soft drink. Make a salad, or the evening before, make double the portion of your evening meal and kind of box that up and take it for your lunch. You can eat more whole grains, oats, whole grain bread, and other cereals. And the general recommendation now is to shoot for 30 grams of fibre per day, or 14 grams per 1,000 calories ingested, kind of whichever is more applicable to you. So that's fibre. Let's move on to the fourth step in the pyramid regarding meal timing, and does when you time your meals during the day, does that impact on kind of weight loss? So you've probably heard the saying, you should eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. So we have actually got some scientific research on this, thankfully. Back from 1997, they had two groups. They split some guys and girls in a study into two groups, where group 1 ate 70% of their calories in the morning, and group 2 ate 70% of their calories in the evening. Now, in this instance, the morning group had greater weight loss. So, but is it really that much to write home about? The morning group lost 3.9 kilos. The evening group lost 3.3 kilos. So that's that's like a pound difference really between the two groups. But the morning group also lost. They had greater fat-free mass muscle losses. So when we're talking about getting toned or getting healthy, the last thing we want to be losing is muscle mass, really. And so the authors of this study concluded that the ingestion of larger morning meals resulted in greater weight loss, but it also resulted in more muscle loss. So if you wanted to retain more muscle on a diet, eat bigger meals at night. But we've also got some later research from 2014, and this was in obese women with metabolic syndrome. Essentially, they were pre-diabetic. They put on quite a restrictive diet of 1,400 calories a day. Group 1 had a big breakfast, so they ate 700 calories for breakfast, a decent-sized lunch of 500 calories, and a small dinner of 200 calories. Group 2 did exactly the opposite. Small breakfast, a snacky breakfast, decent-sized lunch, and a big dinner. And contrary to the previous study, the big breakfast group lost more weight, their waist measurement reduced the largest amount, and they stayed fuller. So am I saying, or is that research indicating we shouldn't be eating late? Well, again, we've got more research here. This is in overweight police officers who were put on a diet, again, quite a restrictive diet, but with a decent proportion of carbohydrates. Group 1 had a small serving of carbohydrates with breakfast, and then they saved the bulk of their carbs for at night. Whereas Group 2 distributed their carbohydrate evenly throughout the day, breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner. And in this instance, Group 1, this eating the bulk of their carbohydrates at night, so lost more body weight. There was a 3 kilo difference in this instance. They lost more body fat, what we're all interested in. They stayed fuller, and they also had greater reductions in waist circumference. So they lost more fat around their waist, and we know that waist circumference is an overall indicator of health. So this kind of contradicts that previous study once again. So essentially, to sum up, meal timing, the research shows very mixed results, suggesting that it actually makes little to no difference to your overall results. And to that end, you should probably eat in accordance with, your lifestyle. If you're more active, you can get away with maybe more carbs or eating carbs around exercise. And to your preference, to be honest, do you want to enjoy a large meal before bed? Does it help you? Does that promote restful sleep? Or are you the type of person who prefers to set yourself up with a big breakfast? Essentially, what the take home from this on meal timing should be is do whatever helps you stick to your diet, to your plan, because sticking to your diet and not breaking it, or what we call adherence, is king, really. Provided you're eating to your energy needs, or you're trying to set yourself up to eat within a calorie deficit. So this is a bit of a sidebar, but I thought it was worth covering. Is there an optimal diet for human health based off what I've just taken you through there? Well, we have what's known as the blue zones. These are areas in the world. You can see there we've got 2 zones in the Med: Icaria in Greece, Sardinia in Italy. We've got Okinawa in Japan, Nicoya in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda in California. And these are areas of the world with the highest concentration of centenarians, so people who are 100 years plus. They also have generally low rates of disease in these areas. And what we do know about the blue zones from studying them is they all typically eat meat and often dairy and eggs, all foods which have been associated with potentially being unhealthy. None of the blue zones, this you might be surprised to hear, are vegan. And only one of the blue zones, which is the one in California, actually contains a high proportion of vegetarians. But these blue zones do have some common nutritional themes. They don't tend to overeat. They eat lots of food that is locally homegrown and prepared prepared from scratch. So again, coming back to that 70 to 80% of your diet being whole foods and minimally processed. And they are regular consumers of both whole grains and legumes, so lentils, beans, nuts, seeds, peas, and whole grains. So they do enjoy bread and things like pasta, etc. And what the blue zones demonstrate to us is that really we can't just put it down to diet. Health is not just diet. The blue zones tend to stay more physically active. They have a great sense of community. They get plenty of sun exposure, which is important for your well-being and production of vitamin D. They live low-stress lifestyles. They all maintain a sense of purpose into old age. So when people in these areas retire, they still maintain a sense of purpose, probably due to the way their communities are set up. And they tend to live in areas where there are low levels of pollution. So some of these things we can't change, but it just goes to show that your environment is equally as important as your diet when it comes to overall health. So yes, diet is important, but it's not the only factor. And if we wanted to sum up what potentially is an optimal diet for human health, it is that we should eat food, but not too much, and mostly plants, so mostly fruit and veg, with a sprinkling of meat and dairy and other things on top, but maintaining that energy balance status. The Okinawans or the Japanese have a saying called harahashi bun. I don't know if I've pronounced that right, but that essentially means they aim to eat to 8 out of 10 full. So they consider finishing your plate an insult, and you will find if you ever visit Japan or Okinawa in particular, that if you finish your plate, they will give you more food because you've not practiced harahashi bun and you're not 8 out of 10 full. But they also eat slowly, very slowly. And by eating slowly, that allows time for your body to signal to your brain that you are full. And it's a kind of way of self-regulating the amount of food you're eating and staying within those calorie needs. So the Okinawans self-regulate their energy intake by ensuring they never leave the table feeling stuffed. So moving on from that little sidebar on the optimal diet for human health, let's cover the final bit of the pyramid on supplements, and essentially should you bother with supplements. Now for this presentation I've limited this down to supplements that may benefit or provide some benefits to those of you suffering with osteoarthritis, and so it's quite a short list. But these two supplements I'm going to present to you now, I would argue most people would benefit from having them in their diet. So the first one is vitamin D3. Now, vitamin D3 is what's known as the sunshine vitamin. It's produced by your skin when you get sunlight on it. The issue is if you live in the UK or the northern latitudes of Europe, that you need 20 to 30 minutes of sunlight over at least 20% of your body for your body to produce optimal amounts naturally. So if you live in the UK and we have, when the clocks go back and we have dark mornings and dark evenings, and not particularly good weather throughout March to October, then it's probably a good idea to supplement with it. Now, the benefits of maintaining adequate vitamin D levels gives us a stronger immune system, so you're less likely to be ill, stronger bones and teeth. For those of you looking to lose fat or lose weight, it can potentially increase rates of fat loss and help with strength gains, or helping to optimize that resistance training. And deficiency is associated with a whole load of bad things, from heart disease through to cancer and bowel disorders. So how should you take vitamin D3? Well, I would recommend that you aim to supplement with it at least during the winter months between March and October, or if you get a generally low amount of sun exposure. A lot of us these days work indoors. We might not see sunlight for days, or we might be night workers, so we spend all day in bed. So generally speaking, we want to aim for 2,000 to 5,000 international units per day. You can either get them in a gel cap, so that these caps will contain a little bit of fat to help with absorption, or if you get a tablet form, then take them with any meal that contains some fat. But it's worth pointing out that because vitamin D3 is fat soluble, so it does store in your fat stores, more isn't better. If you stick to these levels, you're unlikely to encounter any issues with taking too much vitamin D. The second supplement I recommend for you guys to consider taking is omega-3 or fish oil. Omega-3s are a subset of fatty acids contained within fish oil, and it provides a host of benefits. If you were to Google benefits of omega-3, you will get hundreds or millions of pages worth of reading on some of the benefits. But the biggest is it's anti-inflammatory, and it can help reduce joint pain on a par with non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as ibuprofen. Getting adequate intakes of omega-3 can help increase fat loss and help with muscle gain. It lowers blood pressure, improves your cholesterol levels and the amount and your kind of ratio of fat in your blood, and it can also reduce risks of things like arrhythmias and stroke. How to take omega-3? A bit like vitamin D, the timing of it doesn't really matter. You just have to remember to take it consistently every day, ideally with a meal. And unless you're eating oily fish 3 to 4 times per week, then it's these two particular fatty acids called EPA and DHA, which are contained within omega-3 oil, is what we're looking for. So you want to pick an omega-3 supplement that is kind of high quality, and we want to be shooting for between 300 milligrams to 1800 milligrams is sufficient to see those health benefits. And up to kind of, if we wanted to push it up to 3000 milligrams of EPA, DHA might be needed to see some of those fat loss and muscle gain benefits. But for most people, if you stick within this range, you're good. If you get a decent quality fish oil, that's probably 2 or 3 capsules per day. And to that end, you probably want to get a high quality or concentrated source of fish oil. It's worth spending a bit extra on, because too much fish oil, if you were to get a lower quality fish oil, you might need to take up to kind of 10 capsules to get within this range. And at that sort of intake, 10,000 milligram capsules or 10 grams of fish oil, you may see some issues with blood clotting, which we want to avoid where possible. And with that, I would just like to thank you for listening and to me rambling on for this last hour and a bit. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found that informative. Please let us know if you have any questions, and I'm sure you can send those in via email, and we'll be able to answer them for you. So thanks once again, and hopefully I will see you soon for some more nutritional tips and tricks. Thanks, guys.